Hello, and thanks for joining us today. I'm really glad you could be here. So today we're talking about getting a lot of stuff done. How do you do it? Look, when you run a business, you quickly see that it absorbs all of your time and you find yourself working in the business and not working on the business, which means that you get stuck. You don't have the ability to actually grow the company because you're stuck working in the company. So today we're going to dive into this. We're going to decode this. We're going to talk about secrets to being able to get it all done. And with us today is Stacy Tuschl. Now, she has made a name for herself as an expert in growing small businesses. She's put it in this way. Stacy started her own business at the age of 18 in her parents' backyard and turned that company into a multi-million-dollar business that she's still running today. The Academy of Performing Arts has 2 locations in her home state of Wisconsin. Now, in addition to being a small business growth coach, Stacy is a best-selling author and founder of Foot Traffic Formula, helping small businesses around the world get more customers in the door, more profit in their pocket, and more happiness in their homes as well. Now, when local area businesses started asking Stacy how she grew her company so rapidly, well, it sparked the inspiration needed to launch the Foot Traffic podcast. And her podcast now has over 1 million downloads and is frequently on the top 30 of all marketing on iTunes. Stacy, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Ty. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, congratulations on your success. You are the person to
Thank
talk
you.
to because you've done so much and do so much that obviously you've mastered this.
Yeah, well, and that's why I wrote the book is because people just keep asking me, how are you doing so much? And I have kids at home. So it's like, there's just a lot going on. And when I kind of looked at, well, what am I doing and how am I doing this? There's a lot of things that it's pretty simple, but simple isn't always easy. And that's the part that I think we struggle with the most. So I'm excited to be here today, excited to dive in and just share with your community.
Yeah, I'm excited too. Now, your new book is Implementation Code: Unlocking the Secret to Getting It All Done.
Correct. Yep.
Awesome. Now,
Yeah.
so let's talk about from the beginning, like what's the importance of time management and organization from an
Yeah.
entrepreneur standpoint?
Well, you kind of, hit the nail on the head when you said a lot of times we just work in our business, not on it. So we come from a place of typically, I should say, most entrepreneurs, we start doing something as a technician because we're good at it or we like it or we think, oh, this would be a great way to make money, right? So a lot of times we are the worker, we are the doer. And very quickly, as you start to scale your business, you will find out that you don't have time to be the only person working in it. So therefore, you've got to start hiring and you've got to start bringing people on so you can work on it. And that is easier said than done. Not only do we have to implement for ourselves, we have to figure out how to get people to come onto our team and then implement for us. So I think the biggest thing is to really start to assess and observe what is actually moving the needle, what really needs to get done. We've had a crazy, ride with the pandemic. And I think a lot of us, especially if you all of a sudden were virtual schooling your kids, you had to decide what really needs to happen. What do I really need to do? And people are finding that through this craziness, they're getting more productive. They're making more money because they're finally having to focus on a couple of things versus doing all of the things.
It makes a lot of sense. And what I see happens as entrepreneurs start a business, they have nothing but time and they don't have money. So they kind of start doing everything themselves because it's the one resource that they have access to. Then they quickly get to bandwidth. And then at that point, it seems like a lot of people get stuck. A lot of people never get unstuck from that point and why does that happen? Because it seems like entrepreneurs at that point kind of are nervous, scared, reserved about hiring people and then having those people trusted enough to take over the roles that they had.
Yeah. I think we get into business and we have no idea what it's going to entail, right? So we get into it and we all of a sudden understand, okay, wow, I need a marketing budget. How do I figure out that? Oh no, I need to hire somebody. I don't know how to hire somebody. I've never interviewed anybody before. And pretty soon, all of these new tasks that are, on your plate for the first time, it starts to overwhelm you. And when we choose to stay overwhelmed, it's easy to say, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do next. That phrase, I'm stuck, is a great way to self-sabotage, right? Because when you tell people I'm stuck or I'm just not sure what to do next, you're allowing yourself to what? Do nothing, stay stuck, right? So whenever I'm working with a client and they say like, oh, I'm just feeling unmotivated, I'm feeling really stuck today, I always say like, let's just remove that phrase out of your vocabulary. Okay. And I give the example in the book of imagine if you were driving down the road and you saw somebody that had gone into the ditch in their car, right? Well, how does that person get unstuck? Do they get unstuck by sitting there doing nothing? No. They start, trying to they're turning the wheel and they're trying to like go in and out and forward and backwards. And they just keep trying anything until they get unstuck, right? We know that if you were in that situation, that's what you would naturally do. But yet when we get stuck in our business, we think for some reason we can just stay still and stay there. And that is a recipe for disaster. So just like you would, go back and forth and try to turn your wheel and do all the things to get out of that ditch, what can you be doing in your business to get unstuck? Movement, momentum, taking action, and just trying something different, trying something new is how you're going to get unstuck, but that's not naturally where people go. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is that it's almost like they don't know they're stuck. It's just like they're comfortable.
Yes. Hmm. Absolutely. And here's the thing, we are comfortable with what we know how to do right now. We're very uncomfortable when I said just earlier, like hire somebody and somebody listening is a solopreneur, they're like, oh, I could never, right? I don't have the money yet. I'm not ready yet. Oh, I don't even have systems. How would I even do that? Like, I've got to get my act together before I could hire somebody, right? So anytime you are going to that next level, right? Whether you're just getting started or you're trying to hit from 6 figures to 7 figures, 7 to 8, there is always something you don't know how to do. There's always a new position you've never hired, or even if you have a team, there's a certain dollar amount you've been comfortable spending. And then all of a sudden your team starts to up level, the business starts to up level. And for the first time ever, you might have a 6 figure salary that you're offering. And that feels uncomfortable, right? Because you've never done it before. So I think there's a lot of feeling comfortable. There's a lot of maybe even feeling scared, or what are people going to think, right? Whether it's people that aren't even in the world of entrepreneurship, it's like, what is my family going to think? What are my high school friends going to think, right? Because now on Facebook, everybody's seeing everything. So I think there's a lot of factors that play a part. And sometimes it's just us. We're afraid of, well, what if I fail? What if everybody sees me fail? Right? So there's so many different ways that you could be holding yourself back and you don't even realize it. Because I agree with you, Ty, when you said, I don't even think they know they're stuck. You're right. Some people say I'm stuck, but there's a lot of people that are sitting there stuck that are not acknowledging it or realizing they're even doing it.
Hmm. Well, time is money. We hear that all the time. Like, what does that
Mhm.
mean to you?
Time is money. And I always tell people, you have to spend time or you have to spend money. You could never choose to do neither, right? If you're like, oh no, I don't have any money, I don't have any time. It's one or the other. So in the beginning stages of entrepreneurship, you probably have a lot more time than you do money. Even if you are working another job or you've got a side hustle or something, if you're like, I don't even have time. Right. But you definitely have one is easier to give. Let's say that. So in the beginning, money is probably tight and you have much more time. So you are willing to do things yourself than you are to spend and invest. So maybe you are willing to do your own social media, put in the time, but you don't have the money or you would prefer not to spend the money to hire a social media manager. Okay. That's the beginning stages. But when you start to excel and go to the next level of entrepreneurship, your time will start to get less and less and less. And money starts to become a much more, money starts to become something where you can get more of. You can never get more time, right? So when I start to look at what could I do next, and I'm maybe giving away bonuses or I'm throwing in, certain things to sweeten the pot for my next promotion, I have to really ask myself, how do I get my time back? How do I stop offering certain things that include me in the bonus? And how do I gift things that maybe I could just pay for, right? Or pay other people to do so I can keep my time. So again, you have to spend time or you have to spend money. You really can't get out of either. It's one or the other. So if you're like, but I'm broke and I don't have any time, you've got to figure it out. You've got to figure out which one you're going to spend and invest in. Right now, I would much rather spend money than time. I've kind of got my sweet spot. I've got two businesses, so I've got children. I want to make sure that I'm able to be present with my family and I like my working schedule. I'm not going to put in more time, but if I want to continue to grow, I'm going to have to spend money on people coming in, maybe on processes, on different softwares that could help save me time.
What about planning and implementation? What's the importance of both?
Mm. So, first, when we talk about implementing and doing, there is so much planning that goes into that, right? There are so many things we have to do to actually plan before we can implement. But there's a happy medium of how long you should be planning versus, right? Because how many people are they're planning, they're thinking about their logo. They've gotten like 7 designs, but they request 3 more, right? They just don't want to take that next step. So you want to make sure that yes, you are putting in the proper planning, preparation, all of that to whatever it is you're doing, right? But you also don't want to spend so much time that you start wasting time. Like Ty, I can tell you're very professional, you're prepped, you're ready to go for our podcast today, and you've put in some prep work for the podcast. But there is a fine line between not prepping enough and prepping too long, where now you're just wasting time or stalling, or you should have been doing something else, right? We've got to be our own boss of finding that happy medium of this is the right amount of time for me to feel confident, for me to get going, get out there, right? But not too much time that I should be spending it over here. And now I'm wasting it.
Is this
That's a
why you
hard
think
thing.
that so many people have a hard time completing tasks? Is do they just get overwhelmed?
Yeah. I think as entrepreneurs, we are naturally visionaries, right? We love to come up with ideas. We have lots of good ideas, right? You probably came up with another business idea this morning, and that's just how we're wired. But we're not that great at finishing, most of us, right? Some people are. We're great at ideas, we're great at starting, but we're not great at finishing. Because how is finishing fun, right? The idea, the innovation, that's where we get excited. And I was literally telling somebody, we talked about starting and finishing this morning. And if you are always good at starting and that you kind of look back and you see what you've done, maybe you've bought a few online courses, you've started watching a virtual event and then you didn't really get to the end of it or whatever that is, you have to be very, very careful because the finishing, the implementation, right? That's what that is. The implementation is where the results come from. So if you're great at ideas and getting started, but you can never implement and finish, that's why you're not getting the results you're looking for, right? And I think too, we will sabotage and say things like, well, I was doing that thing, but then I realized, oh, my market didn't want that, or right. And then I stop. We give a reason for why we stopped. It wasn't like, oh, I just quit. No, no, no. We give a valid reason that we're justifying why we didn't finish that thing, right? But let me ask you, like, picture something in your head, something that you started, but you never finished, and ask yourself, like, where could that have gone if you gave it all you could, the level it needed, and you actually followed through with it? Think of the difference of where you would be. And I think sometimes too, as podcasters, and I love listening to podcasts, I follow other podcasters, right? I follow people much bigger than I am. And what I will do is I'll look at what they're doing. And even in my head, I think, oh, I can do that. And then I try to copy or model it for myself, right? But what people do when they do that, a lot of times we get inspired by other people. They look at the finished product. They say, okay, I can do that. They put in half the amount of time that person prepared, right? They did it at maybe a fourth as good as that person did it, with an eighth amount of the resources that person had. And they're like, why didn't I get the results? It's like, well, there's a backstory, there's a behind the scenes that you have to really start to work through and figure out and then commit to. And when people see the behind the scenes, when they see the backstage area, what's really going on, what we're really doing, they're like, oh, I don't want to do that. But then your results are going to suffer.
What about a to-do list? You an advocate? Do you think it really helps to kind of get your day in order? Because you kind of talked about best use of time. Is that a
Yeah.
way to get that done?
Good question. Yeah. So Ty, to-do lists, I don't know that I want to call it that, but we absolutely need lists and checklists and all of that. So my strategy is, first, the biggest strategy I have is I do not keep anything in my head. My brain, it's not to store things, it's to process things. We have to remember that your brain is not to store your grocery list and what you have to do tomorrow and somebody's birthday a month from now. It is to process information. So when you come up with an idea, a strategy, something you forgot to do, something that needs to get done, I want you to immediately get it out of your head and put it on paper. Okay. So what I do is, especially if you feel like you're behind, you're overwhelmed, and you're not good at having it written down, I would recommend really just doing a big brain dump of everything that you know you've got to get out of your head on paper. So right now, I've got nothing to brain dump. After you start doing this, you will learn and train yourself not to have to remember anything in your brain. Like if you were to say something, Ty, and it sparks something like, oh shoot, this person's birthday is tomorrow, I just remembered this. I've got a pen, I've got a little post-it. While we were talking, I would quickly write down this person's birthday or say something where when I was done, I would see it, it would trigger me and I'd go, oh yeah, I've got to do that. So if you're ever thinking, well, I'm in the middle of something, I'll do that later, or I always stop, pause, write it down. So the first step is brain dump. Okay. That can be very overwhelming to somebody, especially when they have not done this before and there's so much to do. So after you do the brain dump, the next question is, can anybody do any of these tasks? Do you have somebody on your team? Could we outsource this? Could we pause this? Could we put it in a parking lot for later? Right. I had a client who told me she was very overwhelmed. So I said, give me your top 10 things you have to do. Okay. So she gives me her top 10 things. And it was like little tiny stuff mixed with like, write a book. Like, this cannot be your top 10 list. Okay. Write a book is a massive, I've written two. I know what write a book is. And that's a massive project. That is not on your top 10 things you need to do this week. Right. So when you start to brain dump and start to prioritize, that's where people don't get good. You know, if you have a to-do list of 20 things, I really want to know what are the top 3 things that you're going to do today to get moving forward. So what I typically do is I have my big goals for the year. And then as I'm breaking down my big goals, and my big goals are, we have a critical number in our business. So we are striving for a certain number of active members in one of our programs. That's my big goal. So when I start to look every week, like, what should I do this week? I ask myself, well, what am I doing to get more clients? Right. And it starts to shift me and mold me into where I need to be going. So when you know your 3 big goals, right? All of a sudden it starts to dictate what happens this month, this week, and today, right? So I'm always looking at my top 3. I have 3 goals for the year, but then it's like, well, what are the 3 goals for the quarter? And what are the 3 goals for the month that help me hit those? And then what am I doing this week to help me hit that? And then what am I doing today to help me hit that goal, right? So these are all things you have to ask yourself. And half of people's to-do list, 90% of people's to-do list aren't really moving them towards those top 3 goals, if they even have them written down for the year.
Yeah, it's interesting. We do something internal. We call them big rocks. And not only do we develop the big rocks for every quarter, but then all of our team leads to get together and share to make sure that like one person's big rocks like aren't going to disrail like somebody else's big rocks because they need resources that throws it off. So it's brilliant
Absolutely.
advice. Well, what about how do you go about habits, developing habits that make you more productive?
Hmm. Yeah. So I just brought up, having a post-it out would be a trigger for me, right? So a habit, there's so many studies out there, 21 days and it's like a permanent thing that'll be, I don't believe that. In fact, I will tell you last year, it was January, I had been working out 5 days a week. And for a while, it was a habit, right? So if the rule is real and if you've been doing something for 21 days, it should stick, right? So last January, I actually think I had COVID now looking back at what happened in January. I think that's what I had.
Yeah, Stacy, we all think that.
I know, right? I flew to California. I came home and I was basically out for a month, completely out for a month. I was so wiped. No one knew what COVID was back then. So I was just like trying to work through everything. And I stopped working out for 30 days. Okay. Now, if that habit was so ingrained in me for, doing it for months and months and months, I should have been able to jump right back into it, but I didn't. I wasn't. I dropped the habit immediately and I had to get back 2 days and then 3 days, right? So how do you start a new habit? And then the question is, how do you keep the habit, right? So starting it, first commit. What do you want to do? What are we trying to get done, right? Maybe for you, it's I need to drink more water. Like maybe it's not even a business goal. Maybe it's a personal goal. You want to drink more water, right? Well, what do you need? Do you need any resources? Do you need anything? You might be so bad at drinking water that you need to go get 6 bottles of water that you put in your office every day so you can physically see them, right? Some of you are like, no, I can fill my water bottle up. It's fine, right? The next step is, what is the trigger to help you drink more water? Okay, well, the trigger might be physically showing the water bottle in front of you so you see it. Okay. Now, the problem is, if you don't even have the habit of getting a glass of water and walking into your office, that will not happen. So the trigger is the most important part. It might be a post-it on your computer that says drink more water, right? It might be an alarm going off on your phone every hour that says drink a glass of water. The trigger is the thing to get you to start doing it. Now, when Instagram stories came out, just Instagram in general, I was not somebody who loves social media. I was very private actually, and never was on social personally. And I remember my team saying, we really need you to start doing Instagram stories. We really need you to help like show behind the scenes. And it wasn't a habit for me. So what I had to do in my Google Calendar was I would set a reminder that said Instagram story AM, Instagram story PM. So while I was working throughout the day and I already was trained to go into my Google Calendar. It was a habit already. All of a sudden I was like, oh, perfect. I'm just going to do a story really quickly while I'm here in my office, and I could check it off. So the question is, what are you trying to accomplish? And how do we set up a trigger to make it happen? And the last piece is the maintenance of it. So if you set up one reminder to do something and then you think you've gotten it, but you fall off the wagon, 30 days from now, 60 days from now, where is the check-in? Maybe it's a reminder that comes up 30 days from now saying, are you still drinking enough water? Are you still working out like you wanted? Are you still posting on Instagram stories? You need those little check-ins. And I think maintenance is the part that we always think we don't need, but we can very quickly be practicing something and then go, oh yeah, I haven't done that in a while, right? It's like all of a sudden you remember, and your team does this too. So you might think you've assigned something and then you're like, hey, I haven't seen the blog recently. And then your blog writer's like, oh, are we still doing blogs? I didn't know that we were doing that. Yeah. So they need triggers too.
What about procrastination? How do you fix that?
So there's a great book actually by Rory Vaden. I don't know if you've read it, called Procrastinate on Purpose. I love this book. Read it. You will thank me. He basically talks about, we naturally are procrastinating, right? But procrastinate on purpose, where you've just scheduled the thing you need to schedule, the day or the week or however long it's going to take you, just put it right then and there. So let's say, for instance, you have a big presentation that you want to create and it's going to take you a week to do it. He's saying, put it the week before it's due on your calendar. Procrastinate on purpose. Just give yourself how long you need, put it there, and then do it. Because I don't know about you, but when I was in college and that big essay was due, when were we writing it? Like 90 days before when it was assigned? Or were we writing it like
The night before, yeah.
the night before? We're like cramming, but like somehow we did it. We got it all done, and I think we need to kind of go back to that mentality a little bit, because what happens is we start to look at all of the things, everything we could be doing. And not only do we procrastinate, we start picking the things that we probably shouldn't be picking. Whereas when you prioritize and you put it on the calendar with how long it actually needs, you have no choice but to do it.
What about wasting time? How do we stop doing stuff that's really, I mean, you've given some great tips with
Yeah.
prioritization, for example, and lists that help avoid that. But how do we just stop doing stuff that's just a waste of our time?
I think, Ty, we have to look at and assess what is a waste of our time. Sometimes we aren't even looking to see or track how that event, activity, the blog, is it doing anything? I mean, it's out there every week, but does it bring in leads? Does it convert? Are people reading it? Have you looked at your Google Analytics? Right. So I think the big question is, we don't even know what is a waste of time. We're so busy doing that we feel like if we're checking off boxes, okay, we're getting things done. The question is, are the things that we're getting done actually moving the needle? So my biggest thing is, we're actually hiring a new employee, and she said, what will success look like in this role? And I said, honestly, we're not tracking a lot of what she was coming in to fix. And I said, I need you to go in and track and assess everything. I want you to present to me what is working, what we should be doing more of, what is not really working or moving the needle or getting us results, and how we either need to scrap it, tweak it, change it. Like, let me know. And here's the thing, if you're listening, there's so many things that we know we could be doing better, but we just don't even have time to look. I don't know if you've ever had a client say, "Hey, your website, I want to," like, oh my goodness, I know my website's not great right now. We're getting to it. It's on our to-do list, right? Like we know it's happening. It's just, we haven't gotten to it yet. How many things are out there or that you're currently doing that you haven't gotten around to actually evaluating? But you just do it because you do it every year. Every Black Friday, you have that same Black Friday sale, but you haven't even looked to see if the Black Friday sale is doing anything for your business. Did you convert? Did you convert that sale into maybe a bigger average cart value with that customer? There's just so many things we keep doing, and half of it, 80% of it most likely, is not producing the results we think it's actually producing.
When do you know when to measure? Because a lot of things, like a
Mm.
podcast, for example, you have a
Yeah.
million downloads. We got like half that, right? But in the beginning, we didn't have any downloads. And I think most people abandoned at that point because they don't have any downloads. They don't have anything. So they get away from it. But you and I don't know about you, but from my perspective, I didn't even look at the analytics for 9 months. And then I looked, and then I had downloads, and then it became a permanent fixture. But if I would have looked a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months in, I would have just abandoned it. So like, how do you fix that part of that?
Okay, I love this question so much. So you're right. I was the same way. I'm like, analytics? There's analytics? Do I have to go in somewhere and check something? What do you mean? I will tell you that when we started measuring our analytics, they started to grow. And I don't think that was a coincidence. So I think even in the beginning, let's say you starting a new podcast next week, I would track on day one, even if it's 0 or 11 or 15, right? The only way you get to really focus on something, right, is to continue to track and say, I want more of these. So if you want more podcast reviews, okay, well, do you track the podcast reviews? Do you know how many podcast reviews you get on a weekly basis, right? Maybe somebody listening is looking for Amazon reviews or Google reviews. Well, that should be something that you're discussing at your weekly meeting with your team, even if it's just your weekly meeting with yourself, right? If it's just you, are you assessing every week, how many Google reviews do we get? When you start seeing 0, 0, 0, finally you're gonna be like, we got to do something because we're not getting the reviews we're looking for. And sometimes seeing 0 or seeing $0 coming in sales today is what we need to see to light a fire under us to reprioritize where we need to go. So the podcast, one thing that we do that has worked really well is, and you could do this with emails, you could do this with your social media post, anything. So we have the team present to me every week the top 3 episodes. I want to see like the top solos, the top interviews, and we just look, and it's interesting to see which one goes to the top. And all of a sudden we realize, wow, the one that talked about Instagram was like way higher than anything else. So we started to assess, like, why do we think that one is at the top? Is it because of Instagram, or do you think it's because of the expert that I interviewed? So the expert I interviewed was a friend. So I called her up and I said, hey, I want to ask you a question. Be super honest. Don't feel bad if the answer is no. Did you promote that episode? Okay. Because if she promoted it, it could have been so much bigger because her audience. And she's like, I'm the worst friend ever. You're going to hate me, but I didn't promote it. And actually, Ty, I was excited that she didn't promote it because what it told me was the word Instagram was what people were excited about. Because honestly, her name was not a big name. She was in a different industry. So I was like, wow, people like Instagram. So I said, let's test this. Let's do another episode with Instagram in the title. Let's see what happens. Immediately shot up to number 2. So if you track what is working, what social media post from the last 7 days got the most likes, the most follows, the most or comments, shares, etc., right? How do we try to do more of that? And then guess what? When you start doing more of your favorites that people like, then more people start liking it, right? More people start following it. And all of a sudden you focus on the top, the winners of everything you're doing, best emails open, right? All of that. All of a sudden, those are the things you'll start to get more and more of. So I say track even on day one, even when the numbers are sad. And that's how you get them to grow, is you just pay attention and you focus on them.
Stacey, as we get ready to wrap up,
Yeah.
one more secret, that you could throw in there that we haven't covered to be able to get it all done.
Yeah. Oh man, there's so many things we could talk about. I really just believe that sometimes we are making things, we think things should be easier than they are. We think we're not good enough or we're not smart enough or like, wow, Ty must just be better at this than me because this is not going as well. It's like you don't know how hard Ty is working behind the scenes, right? We forget that this entrepreneurship, it takes real work, right? I'm not saying go work 60 hours, 100 hours, etc. But I am saying that it is going to take work and it's going to take moments of failure. It's going to take moments of you putting everything in that new offer, that new price point, that new whatever you're doing, and you'll hear crickets, right? It's that, that roller coaster ride that we're on, but it's so worth it in the end. So you really have to stop expecting things to be easier or assuming that you're doing it wrong because it's not coming natural to you. And just know that the way that it becomes natural is by doing it. I've been interviewed now, I don't even know how many times. And I will tell you, it was not natural the first time I was interviewed. I was awkward. I definitely was not like contributing the way that I should have been. I was nervous, right? But the more I started to do it, the more it just became natural. So if something seems hard, practice, keep doing it, right? Bring up the consistency, up the frequency of what it is you're struggling with, and it'll start to get easier, I promise.
Stacey, where can everybody go to learn more?
Thank you. Foot Traffic is my podcast. So definitely check out the podcast there. And then everywhere on social media, I'm at Stacy Tuschl. I am definitely the most active on Instagram and Facebook for sure.
Cool. So, and you mind if I give out your website as well? Is that cool?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
All right. Thanks for coming on with us today.
Absolutely. Ty, thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
So listen, you've got to, as an entrepreneur, be good at this skill. Like you can't grow a successful business if you're not good at getting a lot done, at outsourcing, at managing, at delegating, at prioritization, all these things we talked about. So what you really want to do is you can do a lot. Go to Stacy's social links. You need to grab her book, but let me send you to her website because her website has a link to her podcast, her blog, a ton of cool stuff. You can work with her right from there. And I'm also going to put a link to her book on Amazon on the show resources page as well. So make sure you visit stacytuschl.com. That's S-T-A-C-Y, Stacy, S-T-A-C-Y. And her last name is spelled Tuschl.com. So it's stacytuschl.com. Make sure you go there, check out her blog, check out her podcast, all these resources. I mean, there's a ton of cool stuff there. And then make sure you grab her book. This book is looks like it's going to be phenomenal. This is something I'm going to grab too. Implementation Code, Unlocking the Secrets to Getting It All Done. We just scratched the surface of all of the stuff that she has to cover. And a lot of it is in this book. So I'll put the link to Amazon, but make sure you look it up, whether you will show resources or go look it up yourself on Amazon. Make sure you grab this book. So thanks for tuning in. Make sure you visit stacytuschl.com. Have a great day.